And some people look at the G and they think the G stands for Green Bay. But Vince Lombardi Sr. always said the G stands for greatness. But we're not talking about football. We're talking about Freemasonry. So what does the letter G stand for in Freemasonry? Some people might say it stands for George Washington, one of our founding fathers. Some other people may say that it stands for God. In the book of Luke, chapter 17, it says the kingdom of God is within you. Some other people might say that the G stands for Gnosis. Gnosis comes from the common Greek noun, meaning knowledge. It's best known for its Gnosticism, where it signifies a spiritual knowledge or insight into humanity's real nature as divine, leading to the deliverance of the divine spark within humanity from the constraints of earthly existence. Some other people say the G may stand for geometry. So geometry is one of the 7 liberal arts. So basically I'm going to try using all 3 of these, the first 3, logic, grammar, and rhetoric, to try explaining the next 4. Okay, so wish me luck here. Here we go. Here's a quote I found: "The key to understanding the doctrine of the world ages is embedded in the geometry of time." So when we think about the great architect of the universe, he can pull out a compass and start drawing up some designs. And through the geometry, we can come up with all sorts of sciences and try to understand them a little bit better. For God geometrizes continually. So I started a project here. You can see this to the right. This was the first edition that I started. So I started by crossing up a 4-foot tabletop. And then I wanted to make it look like a clock somewhat, so I added 12 points to it. I started connecting a lot of different lines on here. And then I was able to break out some shapes within these lines into 8 different stars here. And this could represent the north, south, and east and west, and the midpoints in between each. Then I added some color to it, which would be for the 4 seasons in here, and also the 4 elements that we use: water, earth, air, and fire. And then we added the sun in the middle, and then some moons. Now we put the skull over the middle of it because this was actually made in 2017, the year of the total solar eclipse. So that's what I represented, is the eclipsed sun. Now if we look at this image here, it shows the path of the eclipse on August 21st, 2017. How it goes from the northwest down to the southeast. There's another eclipse coming up here, April 8th, 2024, and it's coming from the south and into the northeast. And it actually forms a cross right over the United States. Now, the 2 eclipses are 7 years in between. And some people say the total solar eclipse was kind of a big deal. But something also happened about a month after the total solar eclipse. And I can refer to Revelation chapter 12. It says, "A great sign appeared in the sky, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was with child and wailed aloud in pain as she labored to give birth. She gave birth to a son, a male child destined to rule all the nations with an iron rod." So now we have the eclipse that was in 2017. A month later this happens, and this is out of Revelations. And some people talk about the 7-year tribulations, but people have probably been thinking about that for ages now. So no one knows when the time will come. But in the sky, this is what happened in the sky here. We had the sun was in the Virgo constellation. The moon was at her feet. She had a crown of 12, which is the 9 stars of Leo, including Regulus, which is one of the royal stars. And then Venus, Mars, and Mercury were at the crown also. Jupiter, by coincidence, was within the womb, and it stayed there for about 9 months. And then on this date, we're pretty close to it, is when Virgo gave birth to Jupiter, which has been known as the king of the planets, so to speak. So now we got an eclipse coming out of when the wheel was made, maybe a 7-year tribulations. Now there's maybe a prophecy in the stars. A lot of people kind of disagree about this stuff, but I think it's very interesting. So back to the wheel here now. To make this, we use geometry to make it. We use number to try to understand it. Now another one of part of the quadrivium and then part of the sciences is music. So we can think about the geometry of music and the circle of fifths. So music is embedded in a geometry of time. Music is a representation of number in time. So if we look a little bit further on it, the sounds are the echoes of the harmony of the spheres, which man took into himself when he came down from the divine spiritual world to the physical world. Now the harmony of the spheres is a theory about the distance and ratios of the planets and how we combine them in musical notation. So there's a hymn that was written in honor of St. John the Baptist. It's famous for its part in musical notation, in particular psalmization. The hymn belongs to the tradition of the Gregorian chant. Do let our voices resonate most purely, miracles telling, far greater than many. So let our tongues be lavished into your praises. St. John the Baptist. And if you see here, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. So they're going based off the harmony of the spheres and St. John the Baptist with this chant. That's where they came with, or musical notation. Now there's also another story about this, that St. John the Baptist and his followers were roaming around and they were inside a cave and the mountain collapsed, trapping them inside. And the story I heard is that they all sang this hymn together and it was able to clear a path, so they were able to escape to safety. So if we look at the geometry of music, it happens to fit right over on top of the geometry I made with my wheel. Some other representations with the 8 sides are the 8 holidays that we have, or the seasons that we have. Winter, summer, spring, and fall. And then we have our halfway point holidays in between. Other symbolism with it here is something called the yugas. There's the Kali yugas, the Satya yuga, and different ages. If you notice on here, we have the zodiac signs that they started incorporating into it. There's an ascending part of the cycle and then a descending part of the cycle. So then we come across this image here, and this is the Dendera zodiac found on the ceiling of the Dendera temple in Egypt. It was carved on a stone, and this is the first representation that we have in history of the zodiac. If we look inside of it, we see a crab, there's a lion. We do have a Scorpio in here as part of our constellations. So we overlap that onto my wheel, and this kind of fits up pretty good too. So now I started thinking about my wheel and how really it represents space a lot more than maybe I thought it did. So I came across one of these. It's called an astrolabe. So it's an ancient astronomical instrument that was a handheld model of the universe. All these things. It was like the first computer, a supercomputer and a calculator all in one of the universe. So then I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to make one of these. So I put the original wheel inside the other wheel, and I started putting them together, and I came up with this image here, which is an up-to-date image of the astrolabe. And that's kind of represented in here. So we have our inner months, our zodiac on the outside, and then we have our great year over here, all the way on the outside. So to explain this a little further here, this is our annual rotation around the sun. January, February, March, and April, all the way around. Then we have something called our tropical zodiac, which pretty much follows the sun's ecliptic. We have the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. That's based on the sun's position on Earth. And then the zodiac signs that the sun was in the winter. So at one point, the sun was in Capricorn in the winter. And just like in the springtime, the sun, for what we know, was Pisces, Aries in the spring. So, Jan, when's your birthday, for example?
October
October when exactly?
11th.
Okay, October 11th. So if we go to October right here, this is about your day right here, October. So you were thought to be a Libra if you were going by your zodiac astrology. Now that's called your tropical zodiac. But if we account for the precession of time, which we call the great years, about a 26,000 year cycle, where we move very slowly about 1 degree per year, so hardly noticeable to the human eye. So over 2,000 years, the stars actually appear to be spinning backward on the spring equinox. So a more accurate calculation for you, Jan, would be Virgo. So the sun is actually in Virgo on October 11th, and not a Libra. So it's the tropical zodiac and then a sidereal zodiac. So sidereal accounts for precession, the slow movement of Earth. So there's also another zodiac too, which gets even bigger. So this is a representation of the Milky Way galaxy. So if we see our sun right here, it takes about 240 million years to rotate around the sun one time, which is very slow. And so each sign you would have, right now we're coming out of the age of Sagittarius and we're moving into the age of Norma. Now Norma represents the square and the straight edge, which I thought was pretty interesting for a Masonic time. So that's the age we're going into, and we'll be there for another 20 million years. Let's talk about the Mayan calendar in 2012. Now, we kind of talked about cycles of time and how the sun will rise and the spring equinox in the stars. So if we go back to year 0 here, if we go to our, here, maybe I'll show you here. Okay, so this is the spring equinox right here. This represents one of the royal stars. So the sun is rising, all these years it's been rising in Pisces. But now since the precession of the equinox, it's going to start rising in Aquarius now. So if we would do a timeline from where we are on the spring equinox, this is present day. If we go back 2,000 years, would be the beginning of the age of Pisces, about year 0. Now, sometimes when we think that's the time of Christ, and sometimes we talk about the Jesus symbol being a fish, that represents the age of Pisces. If we go back another 4,000 years, we get to the beginning of the age of Aries. Aries represents Moses in this way. Now, if you remember when we talked about Moses came down from Mount Sinai after receiving the 10 Commandments, and he's seen that people are worshiping a golden bull. And then he ends up slaying the bull, killing the golden bull, which is ending the age of Taurus and bringing on the age of Aries. So by understanding how the time works, we can understand what kind of age we're in and understand larger cycles of time. So the age of Aquarius and the precession of the equinoxes. So right now, if you think about the Mayan calendar in 2012, the sun has been rising in Pisces for 2,000 years, and on the 2012 Mayan calendar comes across and says it's going to be the beginning of a new age. We're the end of an old age. Because right now in the spring equinox, now the sun is starting to rise in Aquarius. And in 2,000 years, it'll be rising in Capricorn. And 2,000 years after that, it'll be the age of Sagittarius. Here's a little video that'll help kind of show what's going on here. So by the Earth spinning on this axis, it changes our North Star too. Our North Star will slowly rotate this ring on top and change position over a 26,000 year cycle. So Pisces was in year 1 up until the present day age now, which we're moving into the age of Aquarius. Aquarius by the year 2000. In the year 4000 will be an age of Capricorn. So this is how we kind of tell what age we're in, is by looking at the stars and by using geometry. Okay, so the Mayan calendar kind of represented this. Now, some astrologers say that the age of Aquarius began in 2012 because they believe that the Regulus star, which is one of the royal stars in Leo, it marked the ancient border between the constellations. Now, Regulus moved within 30 degrees of September equinox. So some people say that this was the beginning of it, and if you presume equal-sized constellations all the way around, it brings us to the Pisces Aquarius at 150 degrees west of Regulus on the March equinox point, reckoning the age of Aquarius. So another thing to get into, we mentioned Leo as one of the royal stars. We think about images like this that show a man with the cross behind him. And in each corner we see a man over here. We have an eagle up here, a bull, and a lion. If we move over here, we see the same type of image. We see the man, the eagle, the bull, and the lion. Now the eagle is Scorpio, which we call now. So at one point they used a scorpion, they used an eagle in the place of Scorpio. So these would be the four royal signs and the stars that go along with them. And here's another depiction right here of the same cross coming up here across. So each of these constellations have a royal star that sits within them. By measuring these royal stars when they fall on the vernal equinox or the solstice, we can tell what age we are in. Now in Persia, Aldebaran watched the eastern sky, the dominant star in Taurus constellation. Regulus watched the northern sky, and was the dominant star in the Leo constellation. And Antares was in the west, and the Alpha star in Scorpio, and Fomalhaut watched the southern sky, and was the brightest star in Aquarius. So we come across this cross right here, which is pretty common. We see that in a lot of theologies, philosophies, and this is where I believe it originates from. So if we look at the four fixed signs of the zodiac, we see Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus. Now in here, there's a little comment here on the bottom that says the beginning of Masonry. It says that ancient cosmic science, of which Freemasonry is the modern survival, gives the date of its inception as that at which the cardinal signs commenced their reign, about 4000 BC, which added to the current year gives us our Masonic date. So sometimes we'll use AL, Annio Lucas, the year of the light, and we would call this 6022 right now. So if we go by 6022, this is where the constellations were. On the spring equinox, we were in the age of Taurus. So if we look back over here, we would have gone back 2,000 years, 3,000, or 4,000 years, and this would be where we start right here. The age of Taurus is when Masonry began. Supposedly, I think it goes back way further, and we're going to get to that in a little bit. So 6,000 years ago, we were beginning the age of Taurus. And that's when it said that Masonry began. So if we look at here, we can see the lion and the summer solstice. So over time, because of precession, Leo is now rotated, and Leo is now in the fall. Just as Scorpio is in the winter, Aquarius is now in the spring, and Taurus is now in the summer. So another interesting thing too, so we put this on a cross here and look at some of the catastrophes in the time of man, the tempo of global change. We see that a lot of these big events are happening right on these lines here. Mostly on the Leo Virgo cusp, and then on the Pisces Aquarius cusp. There's a couple other events that happen on the other signs, but this one's the most important here. So if we go back 26,000 years ago from where we are right now, in our cosmic time and the age of Aquarius. So last time the age of Aquarius began was the onset of the late Wisconsin Ice Age. So we go into heating trends and cooling trends. So 26,000 years ago, we began to slowly cool again over time. Now, if we go directly across about 13,000 years ago, we can see the onset of the Younger Dryas, which is a climate catastrophe. And that's when we lost all our big mammals, and we can see the Younger Dryas boundary field. So they call it the Younger Dryas impact theory. The Younger Dryas boundary field, these are known common impact sites that they believe have crashed into the glaciers that were there in other parts of the country and caused rapid melting, like extreme melting where the impact would be more than our nuclear arsenal that we have today. And it would kick up all this dust into the sky and go into a rapid cooling period. And we can see this here by our Greenland ice core samples. So the Earth was gradually warming, and then something happened here. This is the beginning of the Younger Dryas cooling. So meteor impact suddenly cools off for about 12,000 years. Got really cold. The sun probably wasn't getting through the atmosphere because of all the dust in the sky. And then it started clearing up and we started getting a little bit warmer then. Now this was in the age of Virgo and Leo, which was in the springtime, about 13,000 years ago, which is one of the royal signs too of Leo. So after this extinction event, we lost some animals in North America, and civilization pretty much got wiped out. Now, if you look at the Holy Scripture, we talk about Noah's flood. It was a great flood. He saved some animals. This could be where the story of the Great Flood comes from. It's from the Younger Dryas impact theory. And now, since that day, we were like all these animals just became extinct. You know, some people say that they were hunted to death. But if you look at, I know there was a recent study that found a woolly mammoth or a mastodon that was frozen still with food still in its mouth. So there's a lot of geological evidence that supports the massive flood. And in Wisconsin is a great spot for it too. Like 30,000 years ago, we got 2 miles of ice above us right now. If you go out to the Wisconsin Dells, you can see a lot of the geological impact of like Devil's Lake. Anybody been to Devil's Lake? So they were saying that's where one of the ice dams was, that all this debris kind of jammed up at Devil's Lake, and it created something called Glacial Lake Wisconsin. And then at one point that dam burst and it carved out Lake Delton and the Wisconsin River and some of the beautiful landscape that we have in the Dells. So after the big flood, everything was wiped out. So here comes, I'll read this here, it says, the ancient knowledge will again abound and overflow as water upon the earth. The remains of this knowledge are everywhere about us, in everyday use and perfect. Its revival will point to a restoration of the period prior to the confusion of living. So it seems like 13,000 years ago, everything was wiped out. All this old knowledge that we had was pretty much gone. And then these guys show up. Now there's a couple of names for these guys. Some people call them Dagon, some call them Ohans. Now these guys are kind of seen all over the world. And the story goes that some of them call them Anunnaki, which basically means guys who came from heaven to earth. Now, if we think about it, the world was wiped out except for everybody in this room. And one day we built a boat and went down to a hunter-gatherer tribe in South America. We would talk about sending people to the moon, how we had computers in our phone and we could talk to people. They would probably think that we were gods. So these guys are coming out of the water, which I believe they were probably came from a boat. They said that Ohans were said to emerge from the sea as fish-human creature to impart his knowledge with the inhabitants of the Persian Gulf. During the day, he taught them written language, arts, arithmetic, medicine, astronomy, politics, ethics, and law, covering all the needs for a civilized living. And then he returned to the sea at night. He had the body of a fish, but above his head was that of a man. Some people say it looked like a costume. So he passed the day in the midst of men without taking food. He taught them to use the letters, science, and arts of all kinds. He taught them how to construct cities, to found temples, compile laws, and explain to them the principles of geometrical knowledge. He made them distinguish the seeds of the earth and show them to collect the fruits. In short, he instructed them to everything which could tend to soften human manners and humanize their laws. So is it a conceivable myth that Oannes was the mermaid has some truth to it? Could the mysterious figure who appeared from the sea to Babylonian coast thousands of years ago to enlighten mankind and deliver civilization to the globe have truly existed? So if these guys were around, where did they come from? And we're going back about 13,000 years. So after the flood, these guys show up, knowing all this knowledge. So where do they learn it from? Any guesses, anybody? Remember any guesses? Here's some more images of these guys. Now some of these are found in ancient Mesopotamia. Another one found in South America. Here's another one in South America. And if we notice one thing in common with these guys, they're holding a bag. He's got his fish on, which I believe he came from the sea. He's got a pine cone in his hand. Now here's another guy, he had wings. Remember, the wings is the wings of an eagle. Maybe it could be part of the Scorpio, the eagle constellation. Or maybe he came from the sky, like the fish came from the sea. Maybe this guy came from the sky. But other things in common, he has the bag and he has the pine cone. So then we found this one here with the bags on top. We see a vulture here. It looks like there might be some kind of sun disk. We see a scorpion here. But the bags are similar. Now, 13,000 years ago after the flood, we were talking about the Dagon, the Oannes guys. So where do they come from? This is my best guess. This pillar is pillar 43 from Göbekli Tepe, which is actually in southern Turkey. It was uncovered in 1994, and they're still doing archaeological digs on it. So they think it was some kind of school or institution at some point where they were teaching people. So maybe that's where these guys came from. There was some kind of civilization that already knew how to build with stone, and they knew about astronomy. They knew about mathematics. They knew about geometry. And that's kind of the basis of our Freemasonry. When we think about the geometry, number, music, astronomy, rhetoric, grammar, and logic, it's all being used here at this point. And I think one of the most fascinating things is that 13,000 years ago, there was an ancient civilization that knew all these things. But also there were stonemasons here too that carved this stuff and erected it. So I think it's pretty neat. So we'll open this up to discussion here. Does anybody have any guesses of what was in the bag? Any guesses? Some people think that it might be the cosmos were in a bag. Some people say it might have been a compass and a square in a bag, so we could geometrize continually and help understand all this stuff that we're talking about. Now, everything I presented here came from me drawing a couple lines on a tabletop, and then I started learning all these things as I went, and how they all tied back to the wheel. So it's kind of a big mystery what was in the bag. And it was a secret. I don't think many people really know what it is. Some people say it might have been a magical potion in there. Perhaps maybe some type of medicine or some type of elixir that would bring people back to truth and remember who they really are. So this is what I think was in the bag. And it was a secret. And though the modern world may know 1,000,000 secrets, the ancient world knew one. And that was greater than the 1,000,000. For the 1,000,000 secrets breed death, disaster, sorrow, selfishness, lust, and avarice. But the one secret confers life, light, and truth. Okay, that's all I got. So that's what was in the bag: love, light, and truth. So does anybody have any questions? That was kind of, so I know I kind of covered a lot of different areas in here. It's pretty complex, trying to touch on the 7 liberal arts and then the quadrivium with the geometry. And I hit a lot of different talking points. There's probably a lot of other stuff. Each one of these subjects could probably go into and dive into a little bit further to understand some of these things. But the biggest takeaway out of it is that I believe in Masonry that we are part of being these knowledge keepers and preserving the knowledge, ancient knowledge that has been around for way longer than we can think of. If we think of these OANs coming out of civilization after the end of the last ice age, 13,000 years ago, they already knew all this stuff. And I believe this knowledge is passed down through memory, and I really do believe that it's all embedded in geometry. And by working with some of these sciences, we can uncover the ancient truth, and maybe someday we won't be a species with amnesia anymore, and we'll remember who we really are. So, all right, that's my conclusion here. Any questions at all?